So hi there, Mark Anderson here, Head of Education at NetSupport, and I'm really excited to have a guest who's staying up a bit late this evening to join me for a conversation. It gives me great pleasure to welcome on to Insights today, Alex Gray. Let me give you a bit of a background into Alex. Alex now lives in Dubai. He's got a master's degree in education, and he is currently the Head of Science at Dubai British School. In addition to his professional achievements, he's a talented speaker, speaking at all sorts of events. He's an author, and he's known for creating engaging and informative content. One of the things that I love about Alex is that when I've ever seen him share before, what he shares is really not just grounded in classroom practice and obviously his experience of working in the classroom, but it's also grounded in research and wide reading as well. So I'm really excited to hear what he's got to share on the Insights show today. And whether he's doing it through social media or conferences, Alex is really passionate, again, a bit like myself, which again makes it a great opportunity for a fantastic conversation with somebody where values align. But he's really passionate about sharing his knowledge for education with others. So it gives me great pleasure then to introduce on to the Insights show today, none other than Mr. Alex Gray. Welcome to the show, Alex. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Mark. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. I suspect you're a bit warmer than myself in these cold climes here in the UK.
Yeah, you'd think that, but unfortunately, we've had a spout of rain over yesterday and today.
Have you?
Believe it or not, yeah, we've had some heavy downpours, and we've got some rain forecast for the next couple of days as well. Unfortunately.
Oh, crikey. My memories of rain in the Middle East is it's a bit like snow here in the UK in that you're just not really set up for it. There's no sort of drainage and roads just get filled with water. Is that same sort of experience still now?
Yeah, it's very much. I think there's the drainage has improved, but even on the car journey home with the kids, there was the guys out and sweeping the roads. Like what I said to my kids, it's like they're sweeping the rain with the pumps and all sorts going on, just trying to clean out because like the puddles start to form, and the way people drive over here, especially adding rain to the mix, and it is a bit of a disaster waiting to happen.
No, it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me. How long have you been out in the Middle East for?
This is our 8th year now. So we came out 2015, originally working for GEMS, which is probably like a lot of teachers do because they are a massive entity over here. And then like a lot of teachers do, it's you realize that education in Dubai is a bit like a business. So, you start looking at packages and people kind of go, hey, we've got this position here. Do you want to come over? And it's very different because once you're into the country, even though I've probably interviewed or spoken with people, it's not like a traditional, what you would say, British classroom interview where you go down to the school, you teach a lesson, do this. It's set up a little bit differently in that respect. So I've moved around a few different schools and settled now. It's my 4th year at Dubai British School, head of science there as well. Mainly because my girls, I have 2 daughters, they're exceptionally happy in primary there as well.
Well, it's always good to do things to keep the family happy, isn't it? Keep your children on track. Can you sort of share a little bit about your sort of journey into education? How did that happen? Did you always want to be a teacher? Was there a teacher that inspired you? What's your story? How did you get into teaching?
So there's always one teacher that inspired me. I think when I was going through secondary school, this guy by the name of Vince Evans, and he was our PE teacher. But he played everything at a really high representative level. So when it came to cricket, represented for Warwickshire, came to rugby, represented Warwickshire, played at Twickenham. I think he'd played tennis at Wimbledon. So one of those, he's not a jack of all trades, master of none. He was a jack of all trades, master of many. He was phenomenal. And it was just how he inspired, how enthusiastic, just everything was just full of energy, and just doesn't matter what ability you were, whether you were a top end representative or still learning and developing. He had time for you no matter what. And he is someone now for me. I'm almost 40. We go back to the UK. He would be someone I would hunt out and speak to friends on Facebook, and just he was a phenomenal role model and embodied real values and characteristics. But it didn't actually push me into teaching. Originally, I wanted to go into the RAF. I wanted to be a pilot.
Right.
Fortunately, I am too big. So I went off to Cranwell when I was 16, 17. And like, look, you're at that point, even playing rugby, I think height wise, they're not going to build a cockpit to fit you. It's literally you either fit it or you don't. And at that point, I was too big, and that kind of devastated me. So also by that, not long after that, I had quite a nasty injury playing rugby. I broke my leg quite badly. And so I was like, I don't know what I want to do, but it inspired me to kind of go and take a human biology. That was my degree I did when I did human biology at Loughborough. Partly because I wanted to get back into sport. It was close enough to home. It was about 40 minutes away from where my folks were living. So close enough to home, but still far enough away. So when it came to weekends or wanting to do anything, someone could come and pick me up, come and stay. And everything was on campus, which I really liked. And it wasn't until probably the third, final year of teaching, I was doing rugby coaching. And my dad just said to me, look, I've seen you coach. I think you'd make a good teacher. And at that time, Loughborough offered a science PGCE. I think they only did science, PE, and something else. Might be tech but they did a science PGCE, so I could stay at Loughborough, could be with my friends, could carry on doing rugby parts that I wanted to, and that was it. And I really took to it. It was one of those things that kind of just, without sounding egotistical, I found it quite straightforward in terms of interacting with children, working as part of a team, planning and delivering, because I spent years already doing it from rugby sessions. You plan your session out, you work with the people, and there's a lot of characteristics and similarities like engagement, different levels of skill level and skills, and games, teams, competitiveness. So a lot of those values, characteristics, of things crossed over and never look back.
That's really interesting that you sort of had that routine. And before we sort of started recording, you were talking about your interest in sport before. When I've heard you speak before at other events and things like you've been involved with me before, things like Learn Live UAE, for example, one of the things that really shone through about your presentation was about how it was informed by cognitive science, metacognition, these kind of things, Alex. But I wondered if I could go off piece for a second since we're talking about sport, because a lot of some of the best head teachers that I've worked with when I've been teaching myself have been former PE teachers. There's an awful lot you can learn about leadership. And we were talking about the books you'll recommend later on in this conversation as well, about being outside of the actual education circles as well, to try and inspire from business and these sorts of places. Could you share some insights into how sports can really kind of impact not only what you do, you shared a little bit then a moment ago, but some insights into how sport can help you as a teacher, not just Friday sports to build relationships with your colleagues after school's finished, but some of the lessons we can maybe learn from coaches and those sort of things, and some of the maybe some of the reading you've done and how that might be impacted on you in your sort of journey through into leadership.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird one. I was having a conversation with someone recently, and I actually said, because we were doing about ECAs, that was why. And I said, I reckon every teacher, probably a secondary teacher, would benefit from doing a coaching course in a sport, like whether it's a level 1 football, rugby, netball, because it gets you to look at your planning in a completely different way. Because I coach rugby, still coach rugby here in Dubai, I coach under 12s, and I have 40 kids. So last night I had 40 boys, 11 and 12-year-olds turn up, and you've got to plan an hour and 15 session with 3 other coaches, and I'm head coach, so that develops skills, engages everyone, and then gets them to put it into practice. And that I've had years of done it. Well, now coaching, I've coached for 20 plus years in rugby, and I've played since I was 8, on and off through injuries and retirement. But it gets you to look at skills. And I did a talk recently about skills versus drills, rote learning versus application of, it gets you to think about those things and how you engage and empathize, and actually have to do the opposite of what teachers do. So as teachers, and most people listening to this will go, we all love the sound of our own voice. And we do. Like most of us are teachers because we like to talk. And I remember when I was doing my level 3 qualification for rugby, my assessor came over to me and he went, you just spoke for 60 seconds and you had everyone together for 70 seconds. He said, the job of you is to pull them in and give them like the 2% golden bits of information. Ask one question or ask a second question, and that's it. He said, once you've asked that and you've got those answers and they're thinking, then send them back, get them working, get them doing and engaged, because the development comes from when they're playing and when they're doing. And that for me really stuck with me. And even into teaching, what you can take from coaching is It's about them. It's not about you. So everything you
Mm,
put and do in a session is about how can you make them, what are you doing to make them, better? And it's you've got to really think about how you break down skills. Rugby, especially rugby, is a huge skillful game. There's lots of components. Even though we would say, look, it's easy: catch, pass, run, tackle. That's what we break it down into. But you can tackle people from a million different ways at different heights, at different speeds. The same with passing. It's not too dissimilar to, is it Ross? I can't think of his name, from the Teacher Toolkit. You've got a book that's literally plan, teach, mark. And I kind of use that crossover between the two and say, teaching is this, and rugby is that. But the intricacies
mm,
that come into it, the creativity you get, because you've got to look at that, and the feedback you have to give, you know, it's very short and concise. I can't stand there and give you 2 minutes worth of feedback. I need to give you very concise points that you can then go and work on and do to develop. So I have a massive crossover between it in terms of even just planning, like,
mm,
macro and micro seasonal plans, and I can take that into teaching. And I think a lot of the characteristics and values that we have in rugby, as I allude to short in books, in terms of, there's a lot of things I would take from that and build into my classroom. So not just pedagogical, informative approaches. Though I'll be honest, it does help. Being a teacher and
mm.
understanding how children learn is really helpful. But actually, it's more the characteristics of respect, and integrity and honesty, collaboration, teamwork. I think those parts are actually really, really important, and what teachers could utilize, learning themselves. We talk as skill sets. Collaboration and communication are really important skill sets in education. And I'm a huge advocate for those, like metacognition and self-reflection. Like, I had an opportunity last night. My A team are preparing for the HSBC tournament at the Sevens this Saturday. Now, can we play the
Mm,
B team, play the Bs? And I just said, what would you learn from that? They're like, nothing. I said, so why do it? And they're
mm,
like, okay. And they were really, because they want to play games, but it's trying to say to them, well, what's the learning value in that? If you played them, they're not of the same level as you. What would happen if you played people of the same level? So it brings in the challenge component. So you're always having to think and be adaptable and flexible, pretty much like in a classroom. But then it's as I say, the communication, the collaboration, respect, integrity that we want to see in the classroom, both from teachers. So how do you ingrain that? How do you embed that into a lesson, or give students the opportunities to develop those skills, versus then actually the students actually embodying and doing it, so that you can go, you know what, that's great, well done, you, great for, and those are the types of things. So that's the kind of the crossover for me, and how it integrates into my life in terms of teaching and also coaching.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Alex. I mean, one of the things that I really liked about what you shared there about is about the sort of the things about education, which goes to your sort of your philosophical approach really to education, which is more than just academics. It's that wider thing. You build a person, don't you?
Yeah.
And that's why, like with me, I think things like break time and your after school activities and the tutor time, those sort of moments in school are equally as important as your academic lessons, because they're all about shaping and molding that young person into the adult that they become.
Yeah.
But one thing I'd like to sort of drill down into further, if that's all right with you, is what you were talking about when it came to the idea of challenge, because challenge is really important, and like you said about how you grow. I'll give you a sporting memory of mine. I used to play badminton, and there was a guy, one of the coaches there. He was just phenomenal, and like from the ages of about to 11 to 14, I didn't beat him once, right? But between those sort of 3 to 4 years, so I would start to I'd snag a few points every now and then. And so I would not only get to learn how he played and what his weaknesses were and things, but I developed. And by the time I got to sort of 14, 15, I was able to beat him. And then by the time I was sort of 16, he didn't stand a chance. And so we learn by challenging ourselves against people and other teams that are better than us. And I think that reflects quite nicely into the idea of gamification, isn't it? Finding that
Yeah.
sort of Goldilocks spot where it's not too hard, to not motivate you, but not too easy to demotivate you. How do you? What are your thoughts around that? And does that apply in some of your thinking with how you work, both with your children in your classroom, and do you also apply that sort of thinking to when you're trying to develop colleagues within the teams that you work with?
Yeah, and I think most teachers now are aware of this, like with all the developments and reading in cog science. It's like the zone of proximal development, like that, the sweet spot you talk about in terms of enough challenge to kind of keep them interested and push. So it's not too hard, but hard enough, but it's not
Mm.
easy. It's not, "Oh, this is too easy." And I think one of the things you can take from rugby is once the pupils have the skills, there's a crossover with metacognition about being strategic and then being reflective. So the top two ends of metacognition. So for me, it's what I would do and bring into this is how can I make my students strategic? So the gamification of things could be that you give them something where they've got to build a strategy or ways or means of doing something. It's like breakout rooms, so obviously, or escape rooms, sorry. So you can do it through OneNote, you do it through PowerPoint, or everything like that. Those strategies of trying to figure out and solve, it's what we would now just call problem-based learning, or things like, oh, can we go into inquiry-based learning? So you're giving students opportunities to be strategic. So rugby's dead easy. You kind of say, look, guys, I'm going to give you 5 attackers, but they've got 3 defenders. There, you've got a space, so it's conditioned, and we're going to play. Go. So there's the first part. You can condition it, and it's the same as every classroom. You can condition the activity that you want them to do. There's a crossover there. You might overload attackers versus defenders as way as you might go into a classroom and go, right, I'm going to give you 2 bits of information. The first one is to do with gametes, because I'm a scientist and biologist, and we've been doing about this. And the other one is to do with variation. So I've given you 2 keywords. Like same in rugby, is it's about scoring points. So you need to give them an outcome, a goal. Or you might just say to them, well, what do you think we need to know about this? Go find out. I'll give you 3 minutes. What do we need to be able to do with these 2 words? Go. And therefore, they're being the inquirers. They're figuring out, it's as we put into it here in terms of want to learn. So they can come back and go, well, feedback and go, is that at the level for us? Is that too easy, too hard? How could we make it? So you've got a group over there. How can you challenge them? Versus how can we make it simpler, scaffolded? So they're dictating what to do. The next part then you could bring in is, and that's the reflection part. And then post that, you can continue to build it in terms of strategies, in terms of, right, you need to get from here to here. I want you to spend 5 minutes talking, discussing how you're going to do it. And then if you want to condition it, you can just go, right, you can only use 3 websites. One of them has to be YouTube. The other 2 are your choice. Note them down. And then you've conditioned them, and you're training them and be really inquisitive and pluck out information. It's almost like saying to them, right, we're going to play Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. You can't use devices. You get 3 questions. You can ask me one, or you can ask someone else, or you can go and ask them, the internet, and that's it. So you're conditioning the students, like in a game, to be strategic, reflective, and actually really think about, geez, what do I want to ask? I can't waste a question now. It's got to be good. So now they're collaborating and really, thinking about what's a good question that's going to get me the information I need. And then if someone's really good strategy wise, they're going to save all the questions to the end when everyone else has asked them and go, right, I'm going to ask you, you, and you, because I know you've got the answers I want. Strategy. It's the same in sport. You go, right, I'm 5 meters out. Who is my biggest, fastest player? You're going to get the ball because I want you. And it's understanding strengths and limitations of the people around you. So things like that have a really nice crossover in terms of developing the metacognition parts, the challenge part. But we don't think of it. Normal teachers who don't have a sports background in terms of invasive games, don't think of strategy. They don't think of how could I make my students strategic thinkers or strategic learners by conditioning, or you'd say kind of like, putting one arm behind their back to some extent. You're getting them to think in a different way and approach learning in a different way. Because normally, like even now, we could talk about ChatGPT, any form of that AI, and they just go, right, go and ask that. But you're trying to move away from that and go, but what's the value in it? What, it's like my A's playing my B's. What's the value? What could you learn from it? How is that going to make you better now? So that when we play a real game at the weekend, or when you come to an exam, you can replicate what we've done now and perform then. So the big thing for me, I always say to the kids, is you practice as you have to perform. So I always say, look, if I want to be a world-class guitar player, I'm not going to go and bang the drums all day. So for these guys, it's the same as what practice are you doing that's going to, allow that performance. So, and that's kind of the metacognition, both in rugby and in classroom, in terms of it's about the best performance.
Thanks, Alex. That's really good examples from your classroom practice. I did mention about how it might sort of impact on how you work with colleagues as well. Have you got any thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like people go, "You're a rugby coach," they naturally think you're a coach. and there's not that they're not that similar. And I've done
Mm,
a high perform a coaching course here. Like a friend of mine has a company in Dubai and went to do this high performance coaching course. And you're working with business leaders and people high up who have their own companies, and it's a very different approach in terms of the questioning and what you're looking to get out of people. And again, it's you try and ask very precise, explicit questions to elaborate deep thought and deep response. So in other words, everything anti-teacher, talk less, active listen more. So for me, what I've taken from that is working with my colleagues. One is about, being present, like actually you're looking to instill the same values, which is trust, to make them feel valued and to build a culture. And that for me is rugby. And I think trust is about turning up and being interested, speaking with people, whether it's first thing in the morning, go knock on the door, ask the question, hey, how you doing? How's your evening? Yeah, what you got on today?
mm,
30 seconds to build that. And on from there, it's actually the question that you come in with. Pretty much the first question I would say, if anyone comes to see me, is what can I do for you? Service. I'm a big advocate of that in terms of leading, is that my role is I'm there for when it hits the fan. I will front up and take on those conversations and deal with. But behind me, it's a case then of what can I do for you? How can I help you get from A to B, whether it's just a conversation or whether it's the teaching and learning, marking, dealing with any of those. And if it's the other one, it's a case of, well, let's have a talk. And 9 times out of 10, the guys in my department know I'm not going to give them the answer. The same
mm,
as from a sports background with people I work with. It's not about me telling you how to break down a defense or how to attack in a certain way or how to go and find an answer. It's about me putting you on a path that you can then do it yourself. So the questioning, and keeping note of that, and kind of just allowing them to set their own goals and go, right, so the next time we're going to talk again in a week. So just remind me, what are you wanting to have done in a week's time that we can talk about? And I'm going to go to that list and go, great, I'm really looking forward to you telling me about how you've tried X, Y, and Z with this subject. So I think coaching is two different sides, but if you kind of approach it in terms of performance, and I kind of like it that way, in terms of trying to get the best performance out of individuals or collectively, like it's still got to be a case of that my team need to trust each other. And so I've got to develop that and they've got to develop that. So we have a cohesive, collaborative unity so that it doesn't matter if we disagree, we're allowed to have friction, because with that friction, we're going to get great results. We're going to look at
mm.
perspectives in a way. And that's the thing. If you know something I don't know, if you're seeing something I don't know, then that means you know something I don't. And I've got to take a step and learn from you. And it's trying to embody that and build trust and culture. And I think it's taken some time, but within the department at school, I think we have that.
I really like that response as well. It sounds like a bit of an echo chamber, really, doesn't it? But I think the sort of key thing I can take from what you shared there is that idea about servant leadership, and that's a great way of sort of bringing people with you on that journey. You've highlighted the importance there of relationships, and you don't build those relationships without the trust that you mentioned, and without being present like you've shared. Your response really resonates with me. Thank you, Alex. One of the things that you mentioned in there was about the importance of deep relationships, and I'm going to focus on that word deep for a second, because whether it's deep teaching or teaching deep, because both of those words appear on your socials in flippy floppy way. So if you're looking for your Twitter, it's teaching deep, and on your YouTube, it's deep teaching. But why did you choose to call yourself, teaching deep, and how does that sort of mirror itself in what you try and do in the classroom?
It's funny you ask that. A colleague of mine only realized probably within the last 6 months, and I've had this for a couple of years. It came from COVID. She's like, oh, I never realized that's what deep stood for. Develop, engage, explore, progress. And that's what I value in terms of learning, moving forward. Anything you do, I'm a big advocate of those things in terms of developing. And I mentioned that best version of self, or even if it's the 1%, whatever it may be, I think we're all capable. And it's a big belief of mine. Everyone is
Mm,
capable of development. Exploration, like we're doing now, we're having a conversation about it. We are exploring like insights, and I think as teachers and individuals, anyone, the exploration is fun, curiosity, inquisitiveness. That's exploration, engagement. And in terms of what we want to engage with our students, engage with each other, engage with what we're doing, and love it. like, I love teaching, love science, love sports, engage with it, and that is infective, in terms of everyone that comes into contact with you about those things, will hear it in your voice, and will come along with you, and then it's progress. Whether it's an inch or a mile, you look at where you've come from the start of your career to where you are now. That for me is the big thing, and it's why I share the content that I do on my channel. Whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's across on Twitter, whether it's on YouTube, and now even with a new podcast. It's about adding value to people, and not value you have to pay for. It's like it costs you nothing to get onto YouTube, or to go onto any of these sites. And I think very much like yourself, we've been very fortunate to live a pretty experienced, and value time within our teaching and meet some fantastic people and then learn from them. And I'm a big advocate of therefore service in terms of being able to give that back for nothing. And if people want to reach out, people want to watch, people want to listen, my biggest thing is that it's adding value. And been really lucky in over the past month, really, where I've really, I suppose, been more consistent and pushed on it, is that there's a lot of people globally going, look, that's really insightful, that's really useful, thanks ever so much. And that's all you want. And that's, for me, is all I want, is to be able to do that. It kind of, going back to university, I know we talked about these previously. I remember the very first girlfriend at university kind of said, we talk about jobs, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know what I want to do, but I know I want to have a really large and profound positive impact on as many people as possible. And it was only on reflection, probably 20 years of finishing university, on reflection, you think, geez, actually being a teacher, how many kids have been through my classroom? How much influence have I had on their lives, a positive influence on their lives and what they're doing now, the type of people they are. And for me, it's continuing in that, but also being able to go, I want to be able to give that back then to the teachers that are coming through so that they can continue that about, right, I want to positively influence the lives of the children in my classroom. And it's that snowball, it's a domino effect of just, being able to bring out the best version of those kids and allow them to see that they are capable of so much, and the teachers as well.
Yeah, well, I'll just do that. I mean, there's nothing I can argue with on that front. And teaching really is the best job in the world. The opportunity to have that impact, like you say, and to make your dent in the universe and things is one of the sort of key characteristics of what it is to be a teacher. And you do far more than just that, though, don't you, Alex? And you alluded to it a little bit just there. I mean, you've spoken at events, you've shared on a variety of vlogs and podcasts and conferences and events. And you're someone who will respond if someone asks you a question on socials like LinkedIn or Twitter. You're keen to engage. You give beyond the classroom, not just with your coaching with the rugby, but with this podcast you talked about. So you moved out to the Middle East 2015, first in the GEM school and over to where you're at now. And you've decided to talk a bit more and extend the conversation around that a bit more in the form of a podcast. Can you share a little bit about what you're doing with that, please?
Yeah. So me and a friend of mine, so an ex-colleague who used to work, we were talking about it prior to Christmas and said, we kind of like to get a podcast together and be able to do this, and it'll be fun. And obviously you mentioned authoring. I was very fortunate to write a series of books, school books, and receive my first royalty paycheck. We were very fortunate, and I wanted to kind of get something that was a keepsake that could remind me of the hard work and the effort that it took to do that, but also continue, I suppose, to upskill the technology, the studio, whatever it may be. And I thought, right, you know what, I'm going to invest in podcast gear so we can start this. So that's how it's obviously the equipment and everything came about. And once I've got that, I'm probably much like yourself. I'm like, right, I'm just running with it. And we started, our first episode came out, I think 2 weeks ago. And it was just that introduction to teachers. Not just, we started probably with Dubai, but obviously we want to elaborate into the UAE. And the podcast is called the International Classroom. And we really do want to explore different international scenarios, because there are a number of teachers, just in England or probably in whatever country they are in, who probably never thought or even thought, you know what, I want to go and teach abroad or live abroad or know what it's like to teach internationally. So the idea was to kind of open that pathway for them to learn from our experiences. My friend Drew and I have both been here for years, and what we've taken from it and gleaned from it, and give back again, so that they can go, actually, you know what, I really like the sound of that. And also so that other educators out there, if they're in the USA or if they're in England or across Europe or Hong Kong, Singapore, wherever they may be, can go, you know what, actually, really like to speak about what it's like to teach in my country or in my school. And that's the aim moving forward is, once we've developed our skill sets and how we're doing things, is to get other educators on, much like you do, and kind of go, what, tell us about your international classroom and what it's like living, teaching within that country, to open it up so that people realize that teaching and education is global. It's
Mm,
not just local to where you are. It's being able to add value, share, collaborate, and go, actually, what, I can go and have an influence on so many people over here, but then I can bring that back, that culture and the learning I could bring back with me to my home country. And then the enrichment I can offer to the children or the parents that I engage with is going to be even more so, because I've learned more, my characteristics, my influences, my culture. And so that's kind of the big aim behind it. And it's enjoyable. It's good, like we are doing now, to stop and talk to other educators
mm.
and actually, even though you're talking about education and those things, it doesn't feel like it. It feels, like you're just having an enjoyable conversation and sharing, without the weight of an expectation of some of the things that do come with teaching.
No, absolutely. And so one of the biggest privileges that I've had with my career post teaching in the classroom has been the work I've done in schools. So, just thinking of one particular, I mean, going into any classroom is a privilege, right? Every day is a learning day, and whatever classroom you go into, you'll always pick up something. We hear a lot of people talking about imposter syndrome. I certainly suffer from it myself, Alex, right? But you walk into any classroom and you'll always pick up one or two tips and these sort of things. I always feel like I walk away from the schools I work with having learned more than I've actually shared, you know. But I always remember one school in Shenzhen. So actually within China, and it wasn't an independent school; it was a state school. 90 children all sat learning rote, seeing how that classroom worked, that experience of being there, looking at their curriculum, discipline, behaviour, that experience will stick with me for my entire lifetime. And so, providing a platform for people to come and just share a little bit about their
Mm.
classroom and their experiences, Alex, I think is a wonderful endeavour. And what a great way to do that and to celebrate. Some people will be like, right, let's go for a slap up meal when they get their royalties, but no, not Alex Gray. Let's get some. And as we shared off air, we're both quite into our audio gear and what have you as well. So what better way to invest and then to use that as a vehicle to share even further, which sort of goes to that personal mission you were talking about before. So if people wanted to get involved, check out the show notes, check out the blog post that goes with this recording as well. We'll make sure you've got all the details to get in touch with Alex if you're interested and keen to share in the international classroom. You said it was, yeah? Podcast with Alex and Drew, then please do reach out and get in touch. I'm sure he'd be very, very pleased to hear from you. We're getting towards the end of our time, Alex, but I wanted to ask you about some reads. And I mentioned this a little bit before, because you've got some interesting things that you want to share. Often in these sort of conversations, we hear the latest kind of, top books by Tom Sherrington or whoever, And don't get me wrong, Tom's books are really, really useful, and he's had a massive impact, and I'm so pleased with how he's had such great success beyond his school leadership. But you've got some slightly different books that can be helpful into education, but aren't from education. That's right, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah. I suppose when I got more into the coaching side of things, I looked more, we could call that self-development, but actually some of the things that have really helped me away from that is personal development, like in terms of the characteristics, type of leader I want to be, and generally how to understand other people. So from my side, I've picked out 3 books that are nothing to do with necessarily education, but actually to do with characteristics and values. So the first one I am enjoying at the moment is a book called Team of Teams, and it's from Stanley McChrystal. Really, really insightful. It's to do with how it's basically stories from the military to do with the Iraq and Afghan war, but how they had to change their approaches to teamwork and collaboration instead of being separate entities, how they completely had to evolve and break things down. So it really focuses on teamwork, communication, and the environment you're in. So it's really insightful into actually how you develop teams and treat people and bring everyone in. And what I've gleaned from that is, and I've said this in my school, is that actually what you want is when you talk about year 11s or you talk about year 13s, the exam groups, it always seems to be like kind of very specific to, right, if your subject, you just speak about your subject. And what I took from this book was, you know what, I want every teacher from year 11 who teach, teaching exam groups, bring everyone in a hall. We get 1 hour to do a hot debrief so that everyone can hear about every student, what's going on, tips, strategies, and then you can hunt people down. You can speak to whoever you need to do. It's the same as the military going, well, the Air Force and the Navy and the Army, well, we don't. Whereas actually, if you bring everyone together and de-evolve the leadership, so it's not like chain of command, but it's spread out.
Mm.
And Nelson, so, in terms of military history, like Nelson, how he approached the Spanish Armada. So just without giving too much away, it's really fascinating in terms of teamwork. The other one that kind of then goes into that is this another one called The Ideal Team Player by Patrick, if I can pronounce his name, Lencioni. Again, just focusing, it's probably a theme here, but about teamwork and developing others and bringing that together in terms of values and trust and how you can develop those. So really insightful. And then the last one to give you is a book called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy by Richard Rumelt. Again, it just goes through and breaks down ideas of, well, what is a good strategy? I know we spoke earlier about strategic learners and strategic thinking, but also when you're going into school and your team and you are part of that, you are going to have strategies and your leaders, whether you're one of them or someone in that team, they're going to, paint a course for you to follow and that vision of what they want to achieve. And it's very much about the strategies you can do to get there. So what makes a good strategy
Mm.
versus actually, sometimes there's a vision and we want to get there, but the strategies of how we do it are bad. And it emphasizes then sometimes what are bad strategies. So for me, in terms of development and working within a team and higher up into SRT, actually, these 3 books have been really helpful for me to communicate, collaborate, and formulate to, again, one, be effective, but also to allow the people I work with to be effective.
Well, some great recommendations by the sounds of it there. I can't comment personally because I haven't read those books, but thank you for sharing those, and I'll be hunting those down for myself, Alex. It does sound a bit, from what you've shared, though, a little bit about the importance of sort of distributed leadership. Would that be a fair assumption from
Yeah,
what I've
I
heard you
mean,
say?
for me, definitely. I remember when I first got my head of department job, I was the complete opposite. First one in, and I suppose it was a long time ago. I was lucky enough that the person who was there before me, who's now gone on to bigger and better things, and he's teaching internationally, like he was really good, in terms of support and allowing you to be, and he kind of embodied that, devolve, I call it devolve, but the sharing of and allowing you to develop. And then the first time I didn't. It was very much like a lot of people like, no, it's all on me. It's on. Whereas over the years, I think it's a confidence, and it's like we said about imposter syndrome. Like you kind of have to feel like you have to prove yourself with this. But for me, I've kind of gone, look, for the last couple of years, I'm going to say, look, I want you to do this for me. I want you to do this, do this. So even in meetings, we kind of go, one of you is going to lead on learning and teaching for the next 6 weeks when we meet in our half terms. One of you is actually going to chair the meetings. I'm not. One of you I want you to work on in terms of the displays. So you're going to, and what we do is every half term we just rotate. So there's a rotation. So, you're then going to lead the meetings. You got to do the minutes. You got to choose what we're going to talk about. And someone else is going to come in and talk about, learning and teaching ideas, and I put myself in that rotation and it puts you all on the same level. Like it's devolved, but it's not like hierarchical where it's me and then we go down. It's no, we're all on the same level across. And it helps with that development. It's then if something goes wrong in the department, if I'm off, one of my kids is sick, I can't come into school today, guys. You know, you know what? Life goes on, and they get on with it, and they know everyone knows what's happening. They know who to, if you need to speak, they do this. Well, what's going to? Don't worry, we got it. It's very much that way, and I think in most functioning departments, it has that. But actually, to say, oh, we know exactly what's going on, we know exactly what's doing. It's inspiring and instilling knowledge, confidence, flexibility within individuals, so that like I mentioned, Nelson. It's giving them power to be flexible and adapt to what they see in front of them rather than going, oh, we can't make a decision because you're not here. It's like, no, I trust you. And it's kind of working that way. And so far, it works for the team I have. Not necessarily always going to work. And you've got different characteristics, different individuals and different experiences. But it's about providing the opportunity for people to get that experience and go, you know what, for them to come back and go, oh, I feel like I failed. It's like, you're not failed. you just know. I'm a big fan of going, well, now you just know a one way, not how to do it. It's like, well, how would you
Yeah.
do it differently? You have done differently. Tell me, what would you do differently? And it's reflect. It's the coaching. Well, go and do it. Tell me what happens once you've done it that way. It's like, oh, you're not gonna. No, of course I'm not. How else are you going to learn if I don't expose you to a challenging situation you've not been in before? That's how I take it. And that's why teachers like myself and others at the moment, you get quite comfortable because you know it yourself. You've kind of been there, done that, and it's not like you want something to happen, but it's a case of, right, where's the challenge, because this is quite comfortable. And that's when I feel that, comfort is the enemy of progress, I always say. So it's, can you give
Yeah.
someone something a little bit that takes them out of their comfort zone, whether it is, right, I want you to go and lead a carousel session. You're like, what? It's like, no, go and lead a carousel session. You have fantastic teaching and learning knowledge. Why are you not sharing it with everyone? I don't. But there's a challenge, and then you help them. So you don't just throw them in. It's like, well, let me help you. Let's sit down and plan it.
Mm.
You're gonna, and that's the communication skill of sharing. So
Well, that's the scaffolding, isn't it? It's like you were saying before about zones of proximal development. It's about giving them that opportunity to do something which isn't so far outside their comfort zone that they fail and it's too hard for them. It's not like jumping. It's not like starting Sonic the Hedgehog on like level 35. You're build. They've been building up their career right through to get to a point where they're actually comfortable doing those sort of things. Have you had any problems? Has anyone sort of pushed back and said, well, that's your job, isn't it? You should be doing that. Have you had any sort of confrontation, or have your teams so far, touch wood, been happy to sort of work in this sort of way of rotating roles and support, working together in a team in that sort of a way?
generally a bit of both. Now they are, but no, I've had occasion where people are just like, and that's when I always think, remember, Lean, it's like everyone. That's when people go like this. Oh God, there's always that one person at the table. It's like, no, you got to do the opposite. Someone resists, lean in, really lean in, and keep going with it, and pose those questions. It's like, well, what's going to happen if you do it? Well, how could you do it? Oh, well, it's not really. I don't have the time. I don't. That's always the excuse. Teachers too busy. I don't
Mm.
have the time for it. And it's like, well, okay, how can I help you make the time? How can I help to give you time to do this? What can I do? And it's like, what can I do so that you've got 30 minutes to do this? Oh, well, now you just excuse, and it can hold people accountable. I don't think there's issues, and I've done it before, where you can just talk to people or take them aside one to one and go, look, and I'm not going to use profanities here for you, but you can kind of just say, look, you're just coming up with excuses now. What's the real issue? I'm scared. What are you scared about?
Mm.
People are, people aren't going to value what I say. Yes, they will. People will respect the fact that you've put the time and effort in to do this, because they're all in the same boat. Ah, well, it's just like, well, let's go through it together. Go and do it. Come back to me. We'll talk it through before you give it to the team. Ah, okay. It's like, you got to have a solution for every problem, and I think that's one thing I say. I even say it to my kids, and they go, "I'll go for every problem," and they'll go, "There's a solution," and it's true. It just there's the solution is there. Sometimes it's a horrible one. Sometimes it's the hard one, but it's still a solution. And your job is to try and come up with 5 different solutions so that people can go, you know what, I feel empowered, I feel supported, and okay, I'm uncomfortable with it, but actually, I'll get used to that. And once you can put them in that situation, the next time, and say, look, we're all in it together. Next time, it'll be easier. And in 3 years' time or in 2 years' time, whatever it may be, it's like you may have found a calling where you're going to go, look, actually, that was really useful because now I realize my interest to this and I want to do this. And, I would never have known if I hadn't have taken that opportunity.
That's really powerful, and I think you've sort of highlighted the key points there about empowerment and support. When you're talking about that, when you were um, sort of play acting, as it were, the conversation, and you were saying, "Oh, I haven't got the time." Well, how can I give you the time? And that's one of the most important things you can do is give people the time, because obviously, with everything you ask somebody to do additionally, you got to think about, well, what can you take away to give them the time to actually do those things. And so, again, great responses, Alex. You've shared an awful lot of things on the show today. Just so many takeaways for our viewers. So thank you ever so much for that. Really appreciate you giving the time up. And I say it must be quite late for you over in Dubai now as well. So thank you for giving up your evening to come on and share. We've got quite a few socials. We'll put them into the show notes. They'll go into the post which goes with this as well. But did you want to sort of share where people can find you before we do wrap up, Alex? Where can they find you?
Okay, so there's a few, as you say. Predominantly, I am, I suppose, LinkedIn. So just Alex Gray, and there's a lovely photo of me as well. So easy to find there. On Twitter, as you said, it is Teaching Deep, and then on YouTube, I have Deep Teaching. And you can also find the podcast, which is on that website as well, called the International Classroom. And that's it. I've started to do some bits on TikTok, some shorts, because it's easy in that. And again, it's down as Deep Teaching. So I'm trying to cover as many social media bases as possible to add as much value to people as possible.
Oh, brilliant stuff. Well, look, thank you again so much for taking the time to come and share on insights with me today, Alex, and I look forward to catching up with you IRL somewhere in the not too distant future. Thanks again so much. Cheers.
Right.